right, here we are ready to dive into the proverb of the day. And to be honest, I haven't looked at all, so I'm just going to open Proverbs chapter 8. If you don't have this practice, using the day of the month to choose the proverb tends to be a really interesting way of finding something new every time you open the book. And so what I like to do is approach these proverbs with a sort of a prayerful atmosphere where I'm coming in and just kind of reading through and waiting for my spirit to be guided toward one thing or another, and then diving in to see what I can understand from that. So I'll begin by reading through the proverb from the top, and to bring you along, I'll go aloud. Does not wisdom call? Does not understanding raise her voice? Now, if you remember the the previous videos I've made, we've talked about the personification of something, which is often translated in the ESV as the adulteress. The Proverbs uses this imagery of personification, basically turning wisdom into a human being and understanding into a human being. And wisdom and understanding are going to do something. Interesting how these two seem to be very much one and the same. Because on the heights beside the way at the crossroad, she takes her stand. Which one? Is it wisdom or understanding? Or are the two of them two different aspects of the same thing? That's an interesting question. Besides the gates in front of the town, the gates are where all the business happened. Basically, this is, what shall we say, on social media or the supermarket. This is where all the trade happened. This was where all the legal stuff happened. The gates are the place of leadership, the place of commerce. At the entrance of the portal, she cries aloud. Let's see what she has to say. Interesting that wisdom, being a she, is calling to men. And let's remember the Proverbs are written by Solomon to sons. In that day, it was primarily the men who would be reading, the men who would be being trained. So this is written for princes. And so one can understand why the author would choose to say wisdom is calling to the men. And my cry is to the children of men. When you have this idea of cry, it seems like it's incredibly loud. Like there's an intense effort going in, saying, do this, come on. O simple ones, learn prudence. O fools, learn sense. Now, there's a difference between a simple person and a fool. And as a shortcut, the fool is one who knows wisdom, but ignores wisdom. The simple one has never learned wisdom. And so this idea of prudence and sense are also, again, two different concepts. Still just kind of unpacking and thinking the way through here. Here, for. So basically, why should you listen to me? Why should you hear what I say is because I will speak noble things, and from my lips will come what is right. It's fascinating how the symbolism keeps coming back of lips. We talked a couple weeks ago about the mouth of forbidden women is a deep pit. And that's a very interesting one if you want to look at that. But here, wisdom has lips. And the reason you should listen to the lips of wisdom instead of the mouth of strange women is that what comes from these lips is right. For my mouth will utter truth. Wisdom speaks truth. That's really an interesting connection now between wisdom. If we think about this in a Greek conception of wisdom, philosophia, the one who loves wisdom, has to do with a way of life. Wisdom is very practical. And if the mouth of wisdom, what wisdom speaks is truth, we have this conception of truth as being something more than an abstraction, as being, um, hmm, it's very interesting. So it's practical, but at the same time, if we remember, Proverbs come in two parts. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. So truth and wickedness are opposite here. But we usually think of wickedness as being an action. And interesting how that's an abomination to the lips. The lips cannot do wickedness by uttering something that is false. I often see, and I'm actually interested in this word because if we don't understand the distinction between different words, terms, there's the term evil that shows up from time to time. There's the term abomination, which we're familiar with for certain reasons. And then there's the term wickedness. And I think that these three are used or chosen specifically by authors because they have a particular meaning or connotation. So first of all, truth, amet. Emet, emet. A feminine noun. Truth, true, faithfully. Sureness, reliability, stability, faithfulness. And then you have truth more as we understand it. Steadfast love and faithfulness. Faithfulness and truth is like, it's very related to this idea of integrity when we come in this idea of faithfulness. God is faithfulness. You know, when God describes himself to Moses here, merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. Faithfulness is probably this word, emet. Let's see. Truth, emet. That's fascinating. Okay, so this has to do with the identity of God is on the lips of wisdom. And the opposite of this, wickedness, resa, rasha, is an abomination. Oh, interesting. We have both of them in here. So wickedness, wicked, iniquity, one time. So this particular word, wrong, wicked, guilt, violence, wickedness, and ethical relationships. Let's see where it comes in. Used a lot in the Proverbs. Okay. Wealth wickedly acquired. And we have this idea of deception and fraud and falsehood. So this idea of wickedness is separated, see, from the idea of sin. And if we simply like interchange these words, we're going to miss something about what the Bible's trying to say, because wickedness and sin are two different things. They may be closely related, but these two aren't just interchangeable words. They both have a unique context to them. Evildoers, wicked men. Here we have understanding in contrast with wickedness and then doing wrong. Wickedness contrasted with righteousness. The tense of wickedness, the scepter of wickedness. Bless the righteous. See, look at this. The psalmist is using three different words to talk about things that are not right, not righteous. Evil, wicked, and iniquity. I sometimes think of myself as a philosopher of sin because I dive in to study this because I want to understand what is going on here in the Bible. And when we simply say it's all just bad, we're missing something. So we're back again to our verse here. My mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. Let's see what abomination means. Because it does seem like Proverbs 8:7 is the verse for today. Abomination, ta'eba. Let's see. It's translated quite consistently in the KJV, which is interesting. And I wonder if this is because it's used very consistently throughout the Bible, or if this just happens to be one of the words that um, is not quite so controversial because sometimes cultural influence leads to a whole range of potential interpretations. And that could either be the way that it was used in Hebrew culture or the way that the translator's culture tends to look at it. So, the outline of biblical usage, a disgusting thing in ritual sense or in an ethical sense. So, we can have it being used two ways. And here in English, we chose to use the word wickedness to describe a thing that is ethically disgusting. Disgusting in abhorrence, particularly an idol. Yes, that would make sense. Israel's sacrifices to God of his people. Let's see. Things which are an abomination. Let's just think about this. Things which are disgusting to God. I kind of like that. If we can think about our word disgusting as something we try to push away from us. We don't like it. Wrinkle our face. Try to close ourselves off from it. Don't want to have anything to do with it. And so then where this word comes in, if disgust is truly the meaning of this word, so abomination. So for Egyptians to eat with Hebrews, basically another race of people, was disgusting. Okay. Yeah, I shared a post this morning about the contrast between finding things like racism in the Bible and saying that practicing racism is a biblical thing. I think a lot of people forget that just because somebody did it in the Bible doesn't necessarily make it good or profitable or even like part of the Christian life. Every shepherd is disgusting to the Egyptians. So the Egyptians do not like shepherds. And that was the practice of the Hebrews, all right? The offerings we shall sacrifice to the Lord our God are an abomination to the Egyptians. Okay. Lying with a male as with a woman is an abomination. You shall keep my statutes and do none of these abominations. So there's a whole list of abominations in Leviticus chapter 18. There's more than one. So a lot of people just focus on this one, but 18 is a whole list of potential things. Why? Oh goodness! You know, I love the book of Leviticus because it has all of these fascinating things. And chapter 18 is especially interesting because it has a lot of things to do with sex. And this here is providing a reason. Now, this is parenthetical, which means a scribe may have added it later, or it could just be, you know, parenthetical thought. It follows 18, we have 26, 27, and then 29. And the reason why you should not do these abominations. So, A, keep the statutes and rules, do none of the abominations. It's kind of like we want to know what the abominations are because the people of the land who were before you did all of the abominations so that the land became unclean. Now, when we think of the word disgusting, we usually tie this to something that is unclean, a mess, something, I hate to use the word dirty because dirt is actually beautiful. Earth is absolutely incredible. We're like, well, this got earth on it. How disgusting. We're really saying that we ourselves are disgusting. So I try not to do that. But there's this idea of the land itself becoming unclean because of certain things that people did. So when people are doing disgusting things, they're having an effect on the land. And anyone who does any of the abominations, the persons who do them will be cut off from among their people. So there's going to be a separation. And this is what the book of Leviticus is all about. It is about separation and making a distinction between what is holy and what is unclean, what is an abomination and what is sacred. And that's why we're going to dive further into Leviticus 18 in other teachings, especially my book. So keep my charge never to practice any of these customs, and do not make yourself unclean by them. All right. Here we have a repetition of the previous one that's directly attached to the word abomination. They shall be put to death. Their blood is upon them. So when innocent blood or clean blood is shed, that blood is upon the person who sheds it. There's an understanding of some spiritual nature of blood in the Old Testament. Like when you have Cain and Abel, and the story of Abel's blood crying out from the ground. There's something of clean and unclean. There's a relationship between human blood, life, and the earth. But yet in this case, when somebody does an abomination, and particularly when they do this one, if a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. Okay, we could totally get sidetracked and dive into Leviticus, but not now. Still working on this word, abomination. Guess what else is an abomination? Coveting silver and gold that is on idols. Taking silver and gold images for yourself. So instead of destroying the images, you take them for yourself. Guess what? That's an abomination. You should not bring a disgusting thing into your house and become devoted to destruction like it. So we want to know the list of all the things that were devoted to destruction. In other words, to be ceremonially destroyed. You shall detest and abhor. Things that are abominations should be detested and abhorred. I feel like that's a pretty helpful way of understanding the word right there. My goodness. I feel like a majority of these words, abomination, are you shall not eat any disgusting things. Kids. It's a command from God. You shall not eat the thing that is disgusting. But this idea of abomination, there would have then been particular things that were unclean. And here's where, like when we're reading the Old Testament to understand something, all of the things that were an abomination to eat in this book are no longer an abomination to eat in the book of Acts. Something changed 2,000 years later after Jesus came. Something changed. And what was once an abomination is no longer an abomination. That is craziness to me. Like, there's so much more to study in there. Sacrificing a defective animal is an abomination to God. So, interesting. This is an abomination has been done among you. This one is an abomination to God. You shall not learn to follow the abominable practices, the disgusting practices, because those practices are the reason why God was driving the nations out. They do not want to. So here's the practices. They're abominable practices that they did for the sake of their gods. I didn't know today was going to turn into this study of abomination, but you think about all of the things that have been done in the name of God that are just absolutely disgusting. The destruction, the pillage, the horror, the death, the war that has followed. These are practices that have been done for our God in that name. Like, can you believe it? Is crazy. And so people will rationalize doing terrible things because it's done in the name of God. I was talking to a friend of mine who's like, yeah, the only death threats that I receive come from Christian people because they think what I'm doing is against God and they need to defend God by trying to make me scared. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. This abominable practice they have done for their gods. And can you imagine how twisted it is when people do abominable practices for the sake of God? Okay. A woman shall not wear a man's garment, nor shall a man put on a woman's cloak, for whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. So, no wearing women's jackets, which is unfortunate because I have one that is like my favorite. You shall not bring the fee of a prostitute or the wages of a dog into the house of the Lord your God in payment for a vow. So you cannot bring money from sex work as payment for a vow. It's interesting how it doesn't say that sex work is an abomination, but that particular money can't be used for payment of a vow. Wow. Okay. so much abomination according to the despicable practices of the nations. So basically, if we wanted to dive into what abominations are, we can see land impure. Their abominations filled it with uncleanness. Wow. Okay, so we get then back down to Proverbs 8. And there's over 100 references to this. For my mouth will utter truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. Wickedness being this idea of falsehood, being disgusting. Disgusting to what? Lips. Lips finding falsehood to be disgusting. So wisdom here personifies the body of wisdom as having lips, and these lips find wickedness to be disgusting. This is perhaps why the mouth will utter truth. There is a personal reason that wisdom will not allow wickedness on her lips. It's because it's an abomination to them. Like, have you ever felt like words coming out of your mouth just tasted wrong, felt wrong, they were awful? This is that same idea. Is wisdom is so familiar with speaking truth or faithfulness that unfaithfulness, like integrity, lack of integrity, speaking in alignment with what is known versus making something up. And let's look at this word wickedness one more time. I'm also curious, obviously quite distracted here, but this word, mouth, palate, taste, gums, the palate inside the mouth itself as an organ. This is a different mouth than the mouth of strange women. Let's just do mouth of see if this will find it. The mouth of forbidden women. What is the word for mouth here? Because this mouth was slightly different. This mouth is peh. Has to do with mouth, commandment, edge, according, word. So this is to kind of like with what is spoken and opening. So it's very, and it also has some sexual connotation to it, as potentially not referring to the mouth in particular. So, okay, these are two different words, which is fascinating now. Here, the word has to do with tasting. Basically, it tastes bad, so I spit it out. For my mouth will utter truth. Wow. I mean, it's crazy that this is the word chosen as opposed to the other one in Hebrew. Like, if I was the writer, I would have used the other word for mouth. Because when we have this idea of uttering truth, it's like when wisdom opens, you see truth. But here, sapha, I wonder what this means to my lips. Sapha, lips, language, speech, sure. Kind of the edge, it's a meeting point, kind of a similar concept to this idea of simple opening or borders of speech, talk, lip, body part, language, edge, sure. Okay. You can see it's really interesting to me. Like, we live in an age post-enlightenment where we have this clear separation between the mental, spiritual, like the invisible and the visible world. In philosophical terms, we're talking about the noumenal, which it cannot be seen, touched, and the phenomenal, which can be observed and studied through scientific methods. Hebrews didn't have this. When you said lip, they wanted you to imagine the body part, but also to imagine, well, language comes from that body part. Well, that's also like kind of the edge or the shore of a person. You have then the lip, the brim, the rim of the cup. So the the symbolism of the word was not detached from the thing that could be seen. The meaning of the word lip is always attached to what you can imagine in your mind, as well as the meanings that are given to it by the language. And so this word, it's an abomination to the lips. Wickedness is disgusting to the mouth. It tastes bad to say anything other than truth. And we looked at this a little bit as wrong, iniquity. I still feel like this word is rather vague in my head, like as far as why someone would choose to use the word wicked. Um, but it's interesting. Wicked scales, deceitful weights. It is interesting to me that wickedness here seems to be connected to this idea of the opposite of faithfulness. It has to do with this idea of deception, um, unfaithfulness. I wonder if there's any more violence. Is there anyway, I want to wrap up the study, but there'll be more to come because this term shows up in different places throughout the Bible, of course, and we'll gather a greater meaning of it as we go through. This proverb altogether seems to be fairly straightforward. It's interesting because chapter 8 is more of a narrative, and so you have kind of a continuous thing from 8:4 is this speech being made by wisdom, saying these things about truth, wickedness, and abomination to the lips. All the words of my mouth are righteous. There is nothing twisted or crooked in them. If we were going to understand this proverb here, we could put it to the next one, basically saying exactly the same thing. Listen, listen, listen. This is truth. This is truth. This is truth. I cannot speak falsehood. There's nothing twisted or crooked in the words that I'm saying. They're all straight to the one who understands and right to those who find knowledge. Take my instruction instead of silver and knowledge rather than choice gold, for wisdom is better than jewels, and all that you may desire cannot compare with her. Wow. So there is something about a connection to truth and wisdom that is better than anything else that we can desire. There's going to be more to unpack, but I think this is about all we can pull out of Proverbs 8:7 and all we can pull out of the time for today. Let me know if you have any thoughts or questions or have a proverb, I guess, you'd like to look at next. We'd love to unpack something that somebody's interested in and maybe even do it together. So definitely be in touch. Cheers.